sorry.
Court after an admitted killer is caught on camera smiling during his sentencing.
Ladies and gentlemen, please step out of the hallway.
Dead.
While most convicts try to behave well during court proceedings in the hope of getting leniency from the judge and jury, there exists individuals who surpass all expectations.
The victim's family asked for justice today. Webster was laughing at them.
In these rare instances, the seriousness of the proceedings is overshadowed by the callous behavior of certain individuals. Their laughter resonates so audaciously that it appears to scorn the very concept of justice, although in the end, justice is served. Here are 10 convicts who laughed at their victims in court. Number 10. East Cleveland. This is Michael Madison. He was found guilty of being responsible for the deaths of 3 women. These women were 28-year-old Shatisha Sheely, 38-year-old Angela Deskins, and Sherelda Helen Terry, an 18-year-old. In July 2013, the bodies of these victims were uncovered, wrapped in garbage bags near the East Cleveland apartment building where Madison resided. The shocking case unfolded after neighbors noticed a repulsive odor emanating from a shared garage used by Madison in the apartment building. Concerned, they alerted the police, who swiftly arrived and forcibly entered the garage. Inside, they made a gruesome discovery: a decomposing body of a woman, tightly sealed within garbage bags using tape. The following day, searchers made additional disturbing finds. They uncovered bodies in the basement of a vacant house and the backyard of a nearby home. Astonishingly, the 3 victims were located 100 to 200 yards apart from one another, and all had endured signs of torture before their deaths. Subsequently, the police obtained a search warrant and entered Madison's apartment, where they uncovered further evidence of decomposition. With this crucial evidence in hand, the authorities issued a warrant for Madison's arrest and tracked him down to his mother's residence. What ensued was a tense, several-hour-long standoff between Madison and the police, until he ultimately surrendered and was taken into custody. During subsequent police questioning, Madison admitted to taking the lives of 2 of the women, but claimed he could not recall how he went about harming the 3rd victim. The severity of Madison's crimes left a lasting impact on Cuyahoga County Common Pleas judge named Nancy McDonnell, who accepted the jury's recommendation that Madison be sentenced to death.
Accordingly, the sentence of death is imposed upon the defendant, Michael Madison.
McDonnell deemed the nature of the crimes so horrific that it outweighed any evidence presented in attempts to spare Madison, including details of his abusive and tumultuous upbringing. On June 2, 2016, Judge Nancy R. McDonnell sentenced Madison to death by lethal injection for the 3 murders. Throughout the sentencing, Madison exhibited a chilling lack of remorse and only smirked. Shortly after the conclusion of the sentencing, Van Terry, the grieving father of one of Madison's victims, began expressing his anguish when he suddenly charged at the murderer. Terry was triggered by Madison's taunting smile. In the ensuing chaos, courtroom deputies intervened to subdue the enraged father, while Madison smiled. The hearing eventually resumed once the father was escorted out of the courtroom. He was also released without charges. As of now, Madison remains incarcerated on death row, awaiting his fate as decided by a judge and jury. Number 9. Luis Bracamontes. Luis Bracamontes, who was dubbed the cop killer by the media, was an illegal immigrant from Mexico. On October 24, 2014, with the help of his wife and accomplice, Janelle Monroy, he committed a series of crimes. Bracamontes shot to death Deputy Danny Oliver of the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department in the Arden Arcade neighborhood of Sacramento. He then proceeded to steal multiple vehicles and in the process shot a driver named Anthony Holmes. Bracamontes didn't stop there. He fatally shot another police officer, Detective Michael Davis of the Placer County Sheriff's Department in the Auburn area, while also causing serious injuries to Davis's partner. Following an extensive manhunt, he was eventually apprehended by authorities. Throughout his trial, Bracamontes displayed outrageous behavior, including profane outbursts. He openly admitted to taking the lives of the officers and made threats to take more. Despite facing serious consequences, Bracamontes provided very little cooperation to the public defenders who were trying to spare his life. Instead, he continuously disrespected and made threats to the lawyers, judge, and witnesses throughout the 3.5-year court proceedings. On February 9, 2018, a jury found Bracamontes guilty of both murders. Then, on March 27, 2018, the same jury recommended the death penalty for him. As the jury's sentencing recommendation was read, Bracamontes smiled and silently applauded. Finally, on April 25, 2018, Bracamontes was sentenced sentenced to death during an emotionally charged hearing where family members and friends of Deputy Danny Oliver and Detective Michael Davis Jr. delivered impactful statements. During the hearing, Sacramento Deputy Scott Brown, Oliver's partner, expressed his heartbreak over the tragic events. Bracamontes grinned while this was going on. Anthony Holmes, the motorist who was shot by Bracamontes, also took the stand and stated that his life had been forever changed and urged for the ultimate punishment. As Danny Oliver's mother, Joyce, shared her painful experience of seeing her son's lifeless body at the coroner's office, Bracamontes smiled while swaying in his chair. The former placer deputy Chuck Bardo branded him a monster and a coward, prompting Bracamontes to erupt into a tirade of obscenities and be forcibly removed from the courtroom. As for Janelle Monroy, Bracamontes' wife, she was found guilty of assisting him during the rampage and was sentenced to nearly 25 years in prison.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're able to step out of the hallway.
Number 8. Danta Wright. Back in October 2016, a teenager named Danta Wright, along with two others, Delrino Gracie and Jermarius Ellison, attempted to rob 18-year-old Jordan Klee, a student at Pioneer High School. Unfortunately, during the robbery, Wright shot Jordan, ending his life. The lifeless body of Jordan was discovered on a pathway near the Pine Lake Village Cooperative on Adrian Drive, located on Ann Arbor's west side. It wasn't until June 2017 that Wright confessed to committing the crime, admitting his involvement. However, what happened the following month in a Washtenaw County courtroom was truly shocking. At that time, Wright was just 17 years old, and he sat there with a smile on his face, almost laughing, as family members of his victim delivered impact statements before the court. These family members shared heartfelt memories of Jordan's passion for sports, the milestones he'll never experience like prom and holidays, and the overwhelming grief they have endured in the wake of his tragic death. After the emotional statements, Wright himself addressed the court, saying, "I just want to tell y'all I'll be home soon. I love my family." Judge David Swartz, presiding over the case, was deeply unsettled by Wright's attitude. He questioned the prosecutors if the sentencing agreement was too lenient and directly addressed Wright, expressing his dismay. The judge stated, "Watching you sit there, smiling, laughing, shaking your head like this was no big deal. I'm very tempted to just say, I'm not going to accept this sentencing agreement and we'll go to trial. And if you're convicted of felony murder, you'll go to prison for the rest of your life. That means you'll die there. That's what I'm tempted to do." For the first time, Wright's expression faltered upon hearing the judge's words. Assistant Washtenaw County Prosecuting Attorney John Vella requested a recess to consult with Jordan's family on whether they would like Judge Swartz to reject the plea deal and proceed to trial. During the brief recess, the family reportedly decided against going to trial as they wanted to move forward from the painful ordeal. Following the break, Wright's lawyer apologized on behalf of his teenage client, attributing his behavior to emotional issues and stating that some people display fear by smiling. Ultimately, Wright was sentenced to 23 to 50 years in prison for the crime.
His smiling was in no way meant as disrespectful either to the family, to the victim, or to this court.
Number 7, Lewis Matthews. Meet Lewis Matthews, a 43-year-old man who, following a 3-day trial in June 2021, was found guilty of 4 separate felonies that rocked the courtroom. So, what did Matthews do? On April 13, 2019, he committed a horrifying offense by taking advantage of a 10-year-old child who happened to be the daughter of his girlfriend. The courageous young girl recounted the night she fell asleep on her living room floor while her mother's boyfriend Matthews was present. Around 3:30 a.m., she woke up to the unimaginable sight of Matthews undressing and abusing her. Fortunately, her mother heard a noise and rushed downstairs, only to be utterly shocked and devastated by the scene that unfolded before her eyes. She immediately dialed 911 for help. While the mother was still on the phone, Matthews acted swiftly and forcibly, took the young girl and 2 other children living in the house, putting them in a car. Despite the mother's desperate pleas, he drove toward a nearby gas station. Inside the store, Matthews dragged the girl along and grabbed a bottle of Clorox bleach from a shelf. He then took her into the store's bathroom, where he ordered her to remove her clothing. He then doused her with bleach. Despite his attempts to destroy evidence, investigators managed to recover traces of Matthews' DNA on the girl's body, clothing, and even on an underwear stained with bleach that Matthews had forced her to discard in the gas station's dumpster. Judge Kimberly Fernandez, who presided over the case, recognized the gravity of Matthews' crimes and delivered a just sentence. She imposed a life sentence for the abuse of a victim younger than 12, 2012, along with an additional 5 years in prison for tampering with physical evidence. Additionally, Matthews received 20 years each for 2 felony charges of lewd or lascivious molestation of a victim younger than 12. It is deeply unsettling to note that as he left the courtroom, having received a life sentence, Matthews shook his attorney's hand and even chuckled, displaying a disturbing lack of remorse in the face of his heinous crime. Number 6. Christopher Harvel Patterson. Christopher Harvel Patterson was a man whose involvement in a theft took a tragic turn. On August 19, 2012, Patterson snatched a gold necklace from Guadalupe Ramos, a 71-year-old woman, as she was walking to her car in the parking lot of Foods Company on Haley Street. In the process, Ramos fell to the ground and tragically suffered cardiac arrest, resulting in her death. Guadalupe's daughter, Natalie Ramos, who was accompanying her mother at the time, witnessed the entire crime unfold. Patterson swiftly fled the scene and sought refuge in a car occupied by 2 other men, 26-year-old Maximilian Lee McDonald and 28-year-old Lawrence Slaughter. The 3 individuals made a hasty escape from the area. It's worth noting that Slaughter, already on parole, was wearing an ankle monitor that provided precise information about his whereabouts on the night of the robbery. Utilizing this crucial lead, the police retraced the suspect's path and managed to obtain surveillance footage capturing the trio together at various locations. Although only Patterson had physical contact with Ramos, the law states that anyone involved in a robbery or burglary can be charged with murder if someone dies during the commission of the crime. Following the arrest of all 3 men, they appeared in court for a hearing. However, it was during this courtroom proceeding that Patterson shocked everyone with his open display of laughter, even as the weight of his actions hung heavy in the air.
Patterson, in the back row, openly laughed during today's hearing.
This terrible behavior understandably infuriated Natalie and Cristal Torres, the victim's granddaughter, who urged the judge not to show any leniency towards Patterson. It wasn't until early 2016 that the victim's family finally found some semblance of closure. McDonald and Slaughter received life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for their roles in the tragic incident. Patterson himself faced sentencing in September 2016 and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. This time, Patterson, who was 20 years old at the time, remained devoid of any reaction as Judge Kenneth C. Twisselman II pronounced the severe sentence upon him. Natalie later expressed that Patterson had received the punishment he deserved. She emphasized that he had never shown any remorse for taking the life of her mother, further reinforcing the tragic nature of the crime. Now, it's time for today's subscriber's pick. Observe this image closely. It shows a young boy who appears to be overweight, struggling to fit into a suit that is clearly too small for him. Seated beside him is a man dressed in a prison jumpsuit, seemingly the suspect in question. The setting suggests that they are in a courtroom. Now, the intriguing part is the suspect's laughter. What could possibly be the source of his amusement in such a serious situation? Do you think that these convicts we have learned about have any remorse for their crimes? Do you believe that some just deal with their remorse with laughter, or are they truly evil? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Number 5. Kamiya Gant. Allow me to introduce you to Kamiya Gant, a woman whose actions shocked even a Jackson County Circuit Court judge who described her as one of the most cold-blooded murderers he had ever encountered. This was during her sentencing in 2014. But what exactly did she do? Let's travel back to 2012 when Gant and her boyfriend Marcel Hill were residing together in Jackson, Michigan. You see, Marcel faced numerous challenges, including mental illness, cognitive impairment, and physical disabilities. On the other hand, Gant, who didn't have any disabilities, possessed a violent and abusive nature. Her mistreatment of Marcel was no secret, with a previous incident involving her hitting him in the head with a hammer. Although authorities charged her with assault and domestic violence at the time, the case was dismissed when Marcel chose not to press charges against her. However, everything took a tragic turn on May 18, 2012. Consumed by uncontrollable rage, Gant ended Marcel's life. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they found Gant drenched in Marcel's blood. Marcel had suffered 11 sharp force trauma wounds and other injuries, believed to be inflicted by various weapons, including a frying pan, a floor lamp, an end table, and a long knife. Gant was apprehended and charged with murder. In an attempt to justify her actions, she claimed self-defense, asserting that she had mistaken Marcel for an intruder or assailant. However, the prosecutors, well aware of Gant's history of domestic violence, remained skeptical of her statements. As the court proceedings unfolded, Gant displayed a disturbing absence of remorse for her heinous act. When Marcel's aunt, Diana Banks Joyner, stood in the courtroom and recounted the abuse her nephew had endured at Gamet's hands, Gamet was seen rolling her eyes and even laughing during the emotionally charged statement. She then interrupted the speech with a callous remark from her seat at the defense table, asking, "Is that it?" The audience gasped at her insensitive comment, and it evoked an angry response from Judge John McBain, who threatened to duct tape Gamet's mouth shut. The courtroom atmosphere was tense and filled with disbelief. In the end, Gamet was sentenced to spend the remainder of her life behind bars, with no possibility of parole. Following the sentencing, Judge McBain made a powerful statement saying, "I hope you die in prison." Number 4. Simeon Adams. Simeon Adams was only 16 when he found himself facing a murder charge for the tragic shooting of 24-year-old Nathan Trapuzzano during a robbery. This incident occurred on April 1, 2014, when Nathan, a computer programmer at Ivy Tech Community College, took his routine early morning walk. He had decided to switch from evening strolls to morning walks to spend more time with his pregnant wife after work. At the time, Nathan and his wife, Jennifer Trapuzzano, had been married for nearly a year and were eagerly expecting their first child. Just 3 weeks after Nathan's untimely death, Jennifer gave birth to their baby girl, Cecilia. In a shocking confession, Adams admitted to a friend that he shot Nathan once in the stomach while forcing him to strip during the robbery. To Nathan's grieving family, the senselessness of his death was compounded by the fact that he never carried anything of significant value on his walks. On April 10, 2014, Adams, clad in a prison jumpsuit and shackled to another prisoner, arrived at a court hearing with a large bandage covering his neck. This was the aftermath of a bullet wound he had received the night after he took Nathan's life. Despite the gravity of the situation, Adams couldn't help but laugh and smile as he was led into the courtroom. Even when a reporter asked if he had anything to say, his response was nothing but laughter. Adams was charged as an adult, given the seriousness of his crimes. In addition to Nathan's murder, Adams was also accused of shooting a man named Eric Douglas outside Baba's Steak and Lemonade eatery just 2 nights before taking Nathan's life. Douglas had been at the establishment with his brother when he had an encounter with Adams upon exiting his car. After a heated exchange, Adams fired 3 shots, 2 of which struck Douglas. In 2015, Adams pleaded guilty to Nathan's murder and received, as part of a plea deal, a 55-year prison term. In addition to this, he received another 12-year prison sentence in connection with the shooting of Douglas. Cheryl, Nathan's mother, shared her perspective on the justice system following Adams's guilty plea for murder. She mentioned that due to the way the justice system operates, or perhaps doesn't operate effectively, the consensus among them was that accepting the plea was the best choice. The reason being that it ensures Adams serves his sentence in prison rather than being placed under house arrest. On the other hand, Shane, Nathan's sister, believed that the punishment was inadequate. She expressed that it didn't align with the severity of the crime committed. Shane emphasized the importance of Adams spending a significant amount of time behind bars to protect the general public from any potential harm. She also stated that if the system had functioned properly, Nathan would never have been put in a position where Adams could harm him. Number 3. YNW Melly. If you're into rap music, chances are you're familiar with Jamel Maurice Demons, better known by his stage name, YNW Melly. This 24-year-old American rapper and singer has made a name for himself with tracks like Murder on My Mind and Mixed Personalities. But behind the music, there's a darker story. On February 12, 2019, YNW Melly found himself facing serious charges, 2 counts of premeditated murder. The incident in question took place in October 2018 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where 2 of YNW Melly's close friends and fellow rappers, Anthony DeAndre Williams, also known as YNW Sackchaser, and Christopher Thomas Jr., also known as YNW Juvie, tragically lost their lives in a shooting. Authorities claim that YNW Melly and another YNW rapper named Cortland Malik Henry conspired to orchestrate the double murder, making it look like a drive-by shooting. Allegedly, Henry drove the victims to the hospital, but unfortunately, they succumbed to their injuries. YNW Melly turned himself in on February 13, 2019, after the charges were filed. Fast forward to June 12th of this year, the day YNW Melly's trial kicked off. In a surprising sight, the Florida rapper could be seen smiling in court. As the trial progressed, he even closed his eyes and clasped his hands in what seemed to be a prayer, followed by blowing a kiss. These actions didn't sit well with Leandra Phillips, the mother of Christopher Phillips, one of the victims. She publicly expressed her discontent, describing YNW Melly's behavior as disrespectful. As of now, the trial of YNW Melly is still ongoing. The stakes are incredibly high, as a conviction could potentially result in the death penalty. The legal process will continue to unfold, determining the ultimate outcome for YNW Melly and the victims' families. Number 2. Tyrell Webster. Sometimes arguments can escalate into fights with devastating consequences. Such was the case for Tyrell Webster, a 27-year-old who fatally shot Grover Cleveland Watson Jr., a 47-year-old man, in April 2012 on Osage Avenue in East Price Hill. The tragic incident occurred during a dispute while Webster was at Watson's house for laundry, drinks, and card games. Sadly, Watson lost his life, and the Hamilton County Deputy Coroner pronounced him dead at the scene. Webster's arrest took place on the same day as the murder thanks to the Southwest Ohio Fugitive Apprehension Strike Team. However, Webster faced setbacks as his previous attorneys withdrew before his first trial, which ultimately ended in a mistrial due to the prosecution's failure to provide evidence to the defense. On October 1, 2013, Webster's jury trial commenced and lasted for 2 weeks. Any hope of leniency quickly faded when Webster displayed a dismissive demeanor during his sentencing hearing, evading simple questions and groaning in response to routine inquiries about his education. During the hearing, Carolyn O'Brien, Watson's sister who is blind, addressed Judge Jody Lubers. Carolyn, in a remarkable act of forgiveness, initially offered Webster her forgiveness for his crime, expressing that she asked God to forgive him as well because she believed he didn't fully comprehend his actions. Seeking to make eye contact with Webster, Carolyn requested the judge's assistance in locating him in the courtroom. To Carolyn's dismay, Judge Lubers informed her that Webster was laughing at that moment. In response, Carolyn delivered a poignant statement, predicting a grim future for Webster behind prison walls where his smile would vanish and he would become someone's prisoner. You laughing now, but the moment they get you behind those prison walls for the rest of your life, you will be somebody's girlfriend, and that smile will no longer be on your face, Carolyn said. As the proceedings concluded, Webster was found guilty of 2 counts of murder and 1 count of possessing a weapon under disability. He received a sentence of 18 years to life behind bars. Number 1. Isabel Martinez's case. Isabel Martinez and her husband, Martin Romero, along with their 5 children, relocated from Chicago to Gwinnett County, Georgia in 2017. Initially, the family life seemed happy and content. Isabel, a dedicated stay-at-home mom, always spent time with her children, playing with and watching over them. Unfortunately, things soon took a dark turn. In the early hours of July 6, 2017, Gwinnett County Police received a 911 call from Isabel in Loganville, Georgia. First responders arrived at a scene they would never forget. On a bed with Bibles placed on top of them were Isabel's husband, 33-year-old Martin, as well as their children. 10-year-old Isabella Martinez, 7-year-old Dakota Montserrat Romero, 4-year-old Dylan Martin Romero, and 1-year-old Axel Oliver Romero. They were dead, and it was obvious that they had been stabbed. However, they discovered one surviving child, 9-year-old Diana Romero, injured but still alive. Diana was quickly rushed to Children's Hospital of Atlanta's intensive care unit, where she underwent surgery to address her multiple stab wounds. Shockingly, it was Isabel herself who turned out to be responsible for these gruesome deaths. She was promptly arrested and faced charges including 5 counts of malice murder, 5 counts of murder, and 6 counts of aggravated assault. Just a day after the tragic incident, Isabel made her first appearance in court. Astonishingly, she posed and smiled for news cameras, giving double thumbs up, assuming prayer positions, and even spreading her arms wide while seated with other inmates. As Judge Thorpe listed the charges against her, Isabel continued to smile, shook her head in denial, and wagged her finger at the judge. The judge sternly admonished her against performing for the cameras. When informed of her right to have an attorney, Isabel, through a Spanish-language interpreter, expressed her refusal to have legal representation, stating that her attorney would always be the people and her faith. Judge Thorpe strongly advised her to hire a lawyer or allow one to be appointed for her. In a subsequent interview conducted on July 10, 2017, a few days after the court hearing, Isabel claimed innocence and mentioned having documents at home that could shed light on what truly happened. She maintained that she called 911 as soon as she realized the horrifying events and insisted that everything had unfolded rapidly. Isabel recounted a recent family trip to Savannah, where she allegedly felt an ominous presence and asked her husband to return home. According to her, there were no arguments during the trip, and everything seemed normal upon their return. Regarding the murders, Isabel made a shocking claim, alleging that a friend of her husband's entered their home and committed the crimes. She stated that the friend used a black knife unfamiliar to her, but insisted it was from their residence. Isabel claimed that this family friend had unrestricted access to their home, yet she was unaware of how he gained entry. However, her daughter Diana, the lone survivor, later revealed that Isabel had uttered the words, "going to the sky to see Jesus," before attacking her with the knife. No one could fully comprehend what drove Isabel to end the lives of her innocent children and her spouse. Family members speculated that her father's recent death, which occurred a few weeks prior to the murders, had plunged her into a deep depression, possibly triggering these tragic events. They also disclosed that Isabel had made disturbing statements about offering her children to an evil force in exchange for bringing her father back. Ultimately, Isabel pleaded guilty to 7 criminal counts and received 5 life sentences. Prosecutors decided not to pursue the death penalty for Martinez, taking into consideration her mental state. Presently, she is confined to an undisclosed mental health facility, where experts will assess whether she can ever be deemed fit for placement in a regular prison environment. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.
You don't know kind. You're evil.